Iran's most dangerous weapon is not its missiles. That sounds wrong. That is why you clicked. You have seen the footage, missiles rising at night, drones crossing borders, air defense systems lighting up the sky, maps covered in red arrows. And the obvious conclusion is simple. Iran is dangerous because Iran can shoot, but that is not the real danger. Missiles are visible, drones are visible, explosions are visible. The real weapon is harder to see. It is the ability to make a stronger enemy choose between two bad options. It is the ability to turn a narrow strip of water into a global pressure point. It is the ability to make Washington, Europe, Asia, oil markets, insurers, tanker companies, and Gulf states all ask the same question at the same time. Will Iran fire? That question is the weapon, not the missile. The missile is only the trigger. And once you see that, the whole conflict looks different. The common belief is this: Iran's power comes from its arsenal: ballistic missiles, cruise missiles, drones, mines, fast boats, proxy forces, cyber attacks. That is the normal checklist. It is how television explains power. Count the weapons, measure the range, show the map, ask who can hit whom. But that is not how weaker states survive against stronger states. A weaker state does not need to defeat the stronger state everywhere. It needs to change the cost of victory somewhere. That is the key. Iran does not have to control the world. It only has to threaten the place the world cannot ignore. That place is the Strait of Hormuz. The Strait of Hormuz connects the Persian Gulf to the Gulf of Oman and the Arabian Sea. The U.S. Energy Information Administration calls it one of the world's most important oil choke points, with about 20 million barrels per day flowing through it in 2024, roughly equal to 20% of global petroleum liquids consumption. The EIA also says there are very few alternative options if the strait is closed. Now stop there, because this is the first trap. If 20% of something the world needs moves through one narrow corridor, then the corridor itself becomes a weapon, not because it explodes, because everyone else depends on it not exploding. That is Iran's advantage. Its most dangerous weapon is dependence, not Iranian dependence, global dependence. And here is the part most people miss. Iran does not need to close the Strait of Hormuz to use it. Closing it is crude. Closing it is obvious. Closing it invites a massive response. Iran's real leverage comes from something smarter. Iran can make the strait feel open but unsafe. That is very different. Open means oil can move. Unsafe means oil moves slower. Insurance rises, tankers wait, cargo gets rerouted, markets panic, politicians deny panic. And everyone keeps watching the same map. That is not a blockade. That is coercion. And this is where the Robert Pape style framework matters. Do not start with weapons. Start with coercion. Ask one question: what political choice is the weaker side trying to force on the stronger side? Pape's broader coercion framework separates military force from political effect. In a summary of his work, Air University describes his categories as decapitation, punishment, risk, and denial, with denial being the strategy most likely to work in conventional war because it makes the target believe its military objective cannot be achieved. That is the lens, not can Iran destroy America? It cannot. Not can Iran defeat the U.S. Navy? It probably cannot. Not can Iran win a traditional war? That is the wrong question. The real question is this: can Iran deny the United States a clean victory? Can Iran deny the United States control of escalation? Can Iran deny the image of safe passage? Can Iran deny the assumption that American protection equals security? That is the dangerous part. Iran's weapon is not destruction. It is denial. It denies certainty. It denies confidence. It denies clean choices. And in a global energy choke point, uncertainty can do the work of a missile. Balance of power does not always mean equal armies. It means each side has something the other side cannot ignore. The United States has overwhelming military power: aircraft carriers, submarines, bombers, satellites, global bases, alliances, precision strike. Iran has less, but Iran has position. It sits next to the choke point. That changes everything. A global power has to protect the system every day. A regional power only has to disrupt it once. That is asymmetry. The stronger side has a broad responsibility. The weaker side has a narrow opportunity. The stronger side must reassure markets, reassure allies, reassure shipping companies, reassure Gulf partners, reassure voters. The weaker side only has to create doubt. That is the balance, not equal force, equal pressure. The uploaded Pape article makes this exact structural point about U.S. escorts through Hormuz. Once Washington publicly protects ships, it ties American credibility to a single question: will Iran fire? If a protected vessel is hit, Washington must either escalate or accept visible humiliation. The article's core line is that the United States must succeed every day, while Iran only has to succeed once. That is the whole strategy. One side needs perfect defense, the other side needs one visible failure. So when people ask, why doesn't Iran just close the Strait? They are asking the wrong question. The smarter question is this: why would Iran close the Strait if fear of closure already gives it leverage? That is the hidden layer. Iran's most dangerous weapon is not the act, it is the possibility. A missile fired is one event. A missile that might be fired is a market condition, and markets hate uncertainty. So do allies, so do ship owners, so do presidents. And there are three signals to watch: not speeches, not hashtags, not viral videos. Real signals: tripwires. Signal one: do empty tankers enter the Gulf? This sounds boring. It is not. Loaded tankers leaving the Gulf tell you oil is escaping. Empty tankers entering the Gulf tell you ship owners believe it is safe enough to go in and load more. That is the real test. Reuters Breaking Views recently argued that Brent crude prices are not the best gauge of whether Hormuz is normal. Again, it pointed to tanker traffic, empty ships, and freight rates instead. It reported that weekly transits had risen to 242 vessels, but that was still far below the 700-plus pre-war level. It also noted that the TD3C freight index remained around $313,000 per day, far above its long-run average of materially less than $100,000. That is signal one: watch the empty ships. Signal two: do allies follow? Not what they say, what they deploy. If the United States moves into escort duty and allies stay back, that is not silence. That is information. It means allies are hedging. They are asking whether Washington is stabilizing the corridor or inheriting the risk. The uploaded Pape article points to this same clue. It says European states had not surged forces into the Gulf while Asian economies were hedging supply rather than relying fully on U.S. protection. It calls that silence the signal. Signal three: does Iran attack under protection? Not any ship, a protected ship. That is the tripwire, because once a vessel under American or international escort is struck, the issue is no longer just maritime security, it becomes credibility. Reuters reported that the International Maritime Organization paused an escort operation through Hormuz after a vessel reported an attack, and that Evergreen said one of its ships had been hit near Oman by an unknown object while following a route recommended by a British Navy agency. That is why the escort issue matters. Escorts are not just protection, they are a public promise, and public promises are dangerous in war because they can be tested. Here is the trap. If the escort works, Washington looks strong. If the escort fails, Washington owns the failure. Iran does not need to sink a fleet. It does not need to defeat the U.S. Navy. It only needs one image, one burning hull, one evacuated crew, one insurance shock, one emergency meeting, one headline that says protection did not protect. That is enough, because geopolitics is not only about force, it is about perception. And perception moves faster than ships. Now, the title makes sense. Iran's most dangerous weapon is not missiles. It is the escalation trap. The missile is just how Iran opens the door. The trap is what happens next. If Washington does not respond, it looks weak. If Washington responds too hard, the war widens. If Washington escalates, Iran can shift the battlefield. If Washington de-escalates, allies question the guarantee. Either way, Iran turns American power into American burden. That is the genius of choke point leverage. The United States has more power, but more power creates more responsibility. Iran has less power, but less responsibility creates more flexibility. That is balance of power logic. The strong actor must preserve order. The weaker actor can profit from disorder. The strong actor must keep trade flowing. The weaker actor can make trade conditional. The strong actor must prevent panic. The weaker actor can manufacture doubt. That is not a missile contest. That is a political contest. And Iran is built for that contest, not because it is invincible. It is not. But because it does not need to be. It only needs enough capability to make the cost of coercing it higher than the benefit. That is the point. Survival is victory for the weaker side. Visible control is victory for the stronger side. And those are different victory conditions, and different victory conditions create traps. This is why bombing alone often disappoints. Bombing can destroy things. It does not always destroy incentives. A radar site can be rebuilt. A missile launcher can be hidden. A proxy can be activated. A mine can be placed. A warning can be issued. A tanker can wait. A market can panic. A coalition can fracture. That is why the question is not, can Iran be hit? Of course, Iran can be hit. The question is, can Iran be hit in a way that removes its leverage? That's harder, much harder. Iran's dangerous weapon has 5 layers. Layer 1, geography. Iran sits beside the choke point. That gives it proximity. Layer 2, ambiguity. A ship can be hit by a missile, a drone, a mine, a proxy, an unknown projectile. Attribution can be fast politically, but messy operationally. Layer 3, market sensitivity. Oil does not need a total shutdown to move. It needs fear. Insurance does not need certainty. It prices risk. Layer 4, alliance pressure. Asian economies need flows. European states fear escalation. Gulf states need protection, but fear becoming targets. Layer 5, credibility. Once America publicly guarantees passage, any failure becomes symbolic. Put those layers together. That is the weapon. Not one missile, a system, a pressure system. Iran's missiles matter because they make the threat believable. But the weapon is the structure around the missile, the choke point, the market, the alliance, the public promise, the forced choice. And that structure is what Iran can use against a stronger opponent. You were not wrong to think missiles matter. They do. Missiles are frightening. Drones are frightening. Explosions are frightening. But the most dangerous weapon in geopolitics is often not the thing that kills the most people in one moment. It is the thing that changes everyone's behavior before it is even used. That is what Hormuz does. A missile has range. Hormuz has reach. A missile travels hundreds or thousands of miles. Hormuz reaches every gas station, every shipping route, every insurance desk, every cabinet meeting, every central bank forecast, every import-dependent economy. That is reach. And reach is power. The International Energy Agency said that in 2025, an average of 20 million barrels per day of crude oil and oil products transited Hormuz, around 25% of the world's seaborne oil trade, and that bypass options are limited. That is why this waterway is not just a map feature. It is a pressure valve. And Iran's strategy is not necessarily to close the valve. It is to put its hand near the valve. That is enough. And now comes the uncomfortable part. The stronger America looks at the tactical level, the more exposed it can become at the strategic level, because every escalation creates a new promise. We will protect the ships. We will keep the Strait open. We will stop the attacks. We will deter Iran. We will reassure allies. Each promise sounds strong, but each promise gives Iran another test. That is how a weaker power manipulates a stronger one. It does not need to win the battlefield. It needs to set the exam. Think about escorting ships. On paper, it is defensive. Warships protect commerce. Commerce continues. Markets calm down. Allies feel safe. But strategically, escorting ships changes ownership of risk. Before the escort, a ship attack is a crisis. After the escort, a ship attack is a verdict. A verdict on American protection, a verdict on deterrence, a verdict on the promise. That is why the Pape-style framework is so useful here. It asks what the move does to the balance of coercion. Escorts can deter Iran, yes, but they also create a clearer target for political embarrassment. Iran does not need to defeat the escort. It needs to expose the limit of the escort. There is a difference, and that difference is everything. Reuters reported that a CMA-CGM container ship struck by a missile in the Strait of Hormuz in early May was so badly damaged that the company's CEO said it might be scrapped. Crew members were injured, and the company had no immediate plan to resume sending ships toward the Gulf. That is the coercive effect. One ship, one company, one decision. And suddenly, the question is not whether the sea lane is legally open. The question is whether anyone wants to risk using it. That is how Iran's leverage works. A choke point does not have to be closed to be controlled. It only has to be doubted. That sentence explains the whole video. Say it again. A choke point does not have to be closed to be controlled. It only has to be doubted. And doubt is cheaper than war. That is why it is so dangerous. The common mistake is to confuse capability with strategy. People ask, how many missiles does Iran have? Or good question, but not enough. They ask, can Iran hit US bases? Important, but not enough. They ask, can Iran close Hormuz? Important, still not enough. The deeper question is this: what does Iran need the United States to believe? Maybe Iran wants Washington to believe that every attempt at total victory will create unacceptable economic costs. Maybe Iran wants Gulf states to believe that hosting U.S. power comes with direct risk. Maybe Iran wants Asian importers to believe that neutrality is safer than alignment. Maybe Iran wants Europe to believe that escalation will damage European economies faster than it will break Iran. Maybe Iran wants shipping companies to believe that the safest route is delay. That is coercion, not conquest. Coercion is about changing choices. Pape's work on strategic logic emphasizes that violent campaigns can be designed to coerce political concessions, not merely to express rage. The University of Chicago's CPOST summary of his 2003 article says suicide terrorism followed a strategic logic designed to coerce modern democracies into territorial concessions. The form is different here. This is state strategy, not suicide terrorism, but the logic is similar. Violence is not the end. The political concession is the end. The attack is communication. The target audience is bigger than the target. The message is not only we can hit, the message is you cannot make this cheap. That is the revelation. Iran's most dangerous weapon is not the ability to punish, it is the ability to make others calculate. So watch the three signals. First, empty tankers. If empty tankers refuse to enter, the system is not normal. Second, allied participation. If allies praise the mission but avoid sharing the risk, they are voting with caution. Third, protected strikes. If a ship under escort or on a recommended route is hit, the crisis becomes political immediately. These are the signals that matter, not the loudest speech, not the most dramatic explosion, the quiet signals, the shipping data, the insurance premiums, the coalition gaps, the routes, the delays, the silence. That is where power shows up first. And here is the most dangerous possibility. Iran may not be trying to win a war. It may be trying to make victory undefined. That is worse, because if victory is undefined, escalation becomes addictive. Every strike creates the need for another strike. Every retaliation creates another threshold. Every threshold creates another test. And soon, the stronger side is no longer asking, how do we win? It is asking, how do we avoid looking like we lost? That is the escalation trap. The deepest mistake in analyzing Iran is to look for the strongest weapon in the arsenal. The strongest weapon is not always in the arsenal. Sometimes it is in the environment. Sometimes it is geography. Sometimes it is dependence. Sometimes it is credibility. Sometimes it is the opponent's promise. The United States says, we guarantee order. Iran says, prove it. That is the weapon, the challenge, the test, the trap, because a guarantee is only powerful until it fails in public. Then it becomes evidence. Evidence for rivals, evidence for allies, evidence for markets, evidence for voters, evidence for every state watching the global balance of power. That is why one damaged ship can matter more than one destroyed missile launcher. A missile launcher is a military asset. A damaged protected ship is a political symbol. And symbols move alliances. Symbols move markets. Symbols move strategy. This is why Iran's most dangerous weapon is not missiles. It is not drones. It is not even the Strait of Hormuz by itself. It is the combination. A choke point the world needs. A weaker power with enough tools to threaten it. A stronger power forced to defend it. Allies watching but hedging, markets pricing fear, and a single question that cannot be answered in advance: will Iran fire? Until that question disappears, Iran has leverage, even if it fires nothing, even if the missiles stay hidden, even if the ships keep moving, because the real weapon is not the explosion. It is the decision the explosion would force. And that is the final insight. Great powers fear defeat, but they fear something else even more. They fear visible loss of control. Iran's most dangerous weapon is the ability to make American control visible, testable, and fragile. Not everywhere, just in one narrow strait, and sometimes one narrow strait is enough. For more videos like this, click the video on screen now. And that's it from me. See you in the next one.